In episode 1 of Paradise, you get introduced to Xavier Collins. He's the lead guy protecting the President of the United States, a guy named Cal Bradford. Xavier lives with his 2 children, James and Presley, and unfortunately, he's a widower. He's pretty serious, he's quiet, seems to be the kind of guy that rarely jokes around. During his morning run, he runs by the house where the president is staying. He runs into one of his colleagues, a guy named Billy Pace, and he gets the update on what happened the previous night, which is a whole lot of nothing. Agent Pace lets Xavier know that he's going to be clocking out early because his stomach is a wreck. There's another agent named Jane who's a newer agent. She's going to be coming in to relieve Billy, which really annoys Xavier because it seems like Billy kind of takes advantage of Jane quite a bit, but it turns out the two are kind of an item. Xavier runs back home to get dressed for work that day, giving both his kids breakfast, but then he notices that his son James is reading a book, James and the Giant Peach, and it takes Xavier completely off guard. James starts explaining to his dad the premise of James and the Giant Peach, but Xavier kind of snaps at his son saying, I know the premise. For whatever reason, there's something about this book that just has Xavier all out of sorts, but he apologizes to his son, he says goodbye to his kids, and he heads into work that day expecting no real issue. When he gets there, though, he finds out that the president is not up, which is pretty unusual. It's about 8 a.m., and at this point, he usually is up. So Xavier heads up to the bedroom, he knocks on the door, there's no answer, and he says, all right, I'm coming in. But when he goes in, the president is dead. And it is not by natural causes. Somebody did this because there's blood everywhere. Immediately, Xavier starts surveying the area, seeing what clues he can gather about what went down the previous night. There's a blood trail leading to the balcony with a cigarette. There's an item missing from the safe. There's 2 sets of earrings that clearly aren't the president's. And there's a pack of cigarettes with a bloody fingerprint on it. Instead of alerting the other agents to what's going on in the president's bedroom, Xavier radios Jane and says, I want you to do a shutdown, nobody in or out, nobody upstairs other than Agent Pace. He'll be here shortly. He asks for about 30 minutes alone because he's trying to figure out what exactly happened. He ends up calling Agent Pace and saying, I need you here 5 minutes ago. And he gives him a code word, which is Christian Leitner, that immediately tells Billy exactly what happened. Christian Leitner with the famous shot, killing Kentucky fans. The president was from Kentucky. His next stop is at the surveillance room, where he talks to an Agent Garcia about the surveillance cameras the previous night, because how is it possible that the president was killed and nobody noticed it? He starts with the previous day. Even though Xavier was on duty, he wants to see if he missed anything. The president met with a woman who is not his wife, and it seemed like he was having an uncomfortable conversation with her. She was kind of dressing him down a bit. Other than that, after Xavier went home, Cal was by himself. His son bailed on him for dinner. He stayed at his mom's place. But he was joined in the night by a woman. And Xavier confirms that the earrings that were left in Cal's bedroom are the woman's earrings. But the woman ended up leaving. And the way that Agent Garcia describes her, they know exactly who the woman is. She wasn't really a threat. It turns out the last person to see the president was Xavier. He came back to close the night down. They talked. It was pretty clear that the president was inebriated. And then he said goodnight to him. He never tells Garcia exactly what he's looking for, but he says, hey, can you just comb over it and see if anything looks out of the ordinary? And then he heads back upstairs and waits for Agent Pace. Pace is floored. And it's unclear about what he's more surprised at, what happened to the president, or the fact that there's an item missing from the safe that is pretty damn important. Xavier tells him whoever did this had a lot of access and knows a lot of information. In a few minutes, I have to tell Jane to call it in, and at that point, we lose all control. I need you to walk the property, check below. Don't take any notes, don't take any pictures, just mental stuff. But it's the little things right now. That's what's going to matter. Billy heads out, and Xavier gets a call from Garcia saying, hey, I did find something. And when he goes downstairs, that something is not all that good for Billy. After Xavier left for the night and leaving Billy in charge, Billy decided to take a nap on the couch. He was out for about an hour and a half, leaving the president unattended. But what's even weirder is the fact he notices that the security camera footage was offline for that same amount of time. Somebody took it out. The reason why no one noticed was because Billy was the only one on the property, and he was dead to the world. He then walks upstairs where Jane and Billy were having a conversation, and he tells Jane, call it in. And after a little while, important people start to show up at the house, including the woman who the president was having a pretty uncomfortable conversation with the previous day. She's allowed in. The president's wife is not allowed in. And the president's dad, who was living on the property, he's very confused about what's going on. One by one, though, everybody finds out exactly why the code red was called. Xavier is forced to go upstairs and recount to two other officers exactly what happened because he was the person who found the president. A little bit into this debrief, an Agent Robinson shows up, and she is the woman who was sleeping with the president the previous day. That's why Agent Garcia and Xavier both knew who she was and didn't think she was a threat. She doesn't seem rattled, though. She actually seems annoyed with Xavier, and she demands to know exactly what Xavier and the president spoke about the previous night before Xavier left. Now, it's important to understand the relationship between Xavier and Cal. Xavier was brought on to Cal's detail right before Cal took his second term. Cal brought him in for an interview. He offered him a drink. Xavier declined. And while Cal was personable and talkative, Xavier wasn't. Xavier was all business. Because Cal was talkative, though, he did let his guard down a bit. One of the reasons why he wanted Xavier was because the head of his old detail was just old. And he also admitted it didn't hurt about the fact that he was black. He wasn't hiring him because of that, but it just didn't hurt the optics. So Xavier was brought on. He ended up learning some things about the president, like the fact that the president smoked cigarettes and the fact that the president's marriage was a sham. Cal figured that the president's wife, Jessica, was just planning to divorce him the moment he was out of office, but for optics, she was staying with him. Their relationship, though, really took a change when Xavier took a bullet for Cal. There was a hot-button topic going on in Colorado that had a lot of people unnerved. While the president was addressing the media, one of those media members ended up trying to assassinate him. Xavier jumped in the way, taking the bullet, and he gained Cal's trust from there on out. And because of this, Cal thought that he owed Xavier something. So he let Xavier in on a little secret that not too many people knew about. The world was about to change forever. Xavier met with a 5-star general, the president, and that woman, the one who was dressing down the president. But it was the 5-star general who did a lot of the talking. He explains that the item in a box contained all the information and data about a highly classified project. It's a fancy way of saying that what was in that box was the most important thing in the world. And the item in that box, by the way, is what was taken from the president's safe. The highly classified data was the fact that they were building a town in Colorado, underground. The world was about to change, and not for the better. And unfortunately, while Xavier and his 2 kids made it to the town, Xavier's wife did not. Because of that, the relationship between Xavier and Cal was severed. And Cal had a lot of respect for Xavier, but Xavier, from there on out, hated Cal. So the conversation that they had the previous day was not a good one. A drunk Cal asked Xavier, "Will you ever be able to forgive me for what happened?" And Xavier went into a story about naming their children. Presley was named after Elvis Presley, but James, that one was different. Xavier's wife would try out names every day until finally she walked into a bookstore, saw James and the Giant Peach, and decided, you know what, that's going to be the name. Because of that, Xavier dove into the story of James and the Giant Peach. When he found out was the fact that originally it was supposed to be James and the Giant Cherry. And sometimes he lies in bed at night wondering if his wife would have still wanted to name their son James had the book been named James and the Giant Cherry. But he tells Cal, "I'll never be able to ask her that. So to answer your question, I'll forgive you when you're dead." And then he walked out. Now, he doesn't tell the group this. Instead, he just wraps up his debrief and he runs home. But he took something from the site. It was the pack of cigarettes with the bloody fingerprint. He pulls out one cigarette, and there's a 6-digit code written on it. 812092. And now Xavier has to figure out exactly what that means.
Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or